Presentation. How to distinguish liability from equity instrument. Or when you are given an instrument, we have to find out whether it is a equity instrument or whether it's a liability, financial liability. So that has been discussed extensively in this standard. And along with that, okay, you have to put them in the right place. But you should not have any mess-ups between equity instrument and the liability. Where you should not put, for example, you should not put financial liability as an equity instrument. That's a major mistake. Similarly, vice versa. Financial instrument, equity instrument should not be classified and presented as a financial liability. Because there is clear-cut difference between a liability and equity. Equity is something that, entity don't have to pay or settle. There's no obligations on the part of the company to settle equity. Whereas liability is always has, or the entities have commitment to settle obligations. They have their So having said that, if you look at financial assets, let's find out what a financial asset is as per the definition given by LKS number 32. Any asset that is cash. So cash is a financial asset. It is straightaway given without going around. They say cash is a financial asset. Then B, an equity instrument of another entity, where you have investments in equity instrument of another entity. To simplify that, I can tell you, when a company make an investment in shares of another company, shares means I am talking about ordinary shares, equity instrument. Now it can be an investment in a private company, or it can be an investment in a listed company or whatever. I am talking about ordinary shares. Without just telling without just naming it as ordinary shares, what standard is talking about is an equity instrument. So, for example, I think you remember that I have discussed that with you in the class also. I said that by the name itself, you cannot say whether it is equity or a debt. For example, if I ask ordinary shares, one can say ordinary shares is equity instrument. But it need not be the case. If the ordinary shares were to be purchased back by the company, if the company has the obligation to redeem the ordinary shares or buy back the ordinary shares, then the ordinary shares that they are issuing on that condition is not an equity instrument, because the company has obligation on their part to redeem or to purchase the ordinary shares what they have issued. Then it becomes a liability. Similarly, preference shares, anybody would say that, under normal circumstances, preference shares are more related to a liability, because you have a dividend percentage to pay, or there is a redemption date for the preference shares, company has to redeem them. So when all those obligations are there, generally preference shares are liabilities. Preference share is a liability. But if the preference share doesn't have any of those features, if it, say, for example, there's no requirement to redeem and there's no dividend to be paid on the preference shares. So if you are not paying any dividend, if you are not compelled, if you are not obligated to pay a dividend, if you are not under the obligation of redeeming it, then it is pretty much like any ordinary shares, an equity instrument rather. So the preference share in that occasion can be identified as an equity instrument, and it is not a liability. So, investment in equity instrument of a company, it can be ordinary shares. Whatever the instrument, if you classify that as an equity instrument, and if you are to invest in that equity instrument, it is a financial asset for us. Simply, if you want to take in a simple format, I would say investment in ordinary shares of any company, a private company or even a listed company, anything is okay, will be known as a financial asset. And the third item is a contractual right. So what it says, why it's a contractual right? Because don't forget the word that I mentioned here. Financial instruments are always originated through contracts. So if you have a contractual right, that can become a financial asset for you. If you have a contractual obligations towards that contract, then it can become a financial liability for you. Okay? So now we capture this contractual right to receive cash. It's worth underlining, contractual right to receive cash or another financial asset from another entity. For example, now take receivables. Any form of a receivable stemming out of a contract is a financial asset. It's a financial asset. Loans to other entities. You give a loan to another company and then you have a contractual right to receive cash. It is a financial asset. Investments in bonds. When investment in bond, why investment in bond is not coming under B? Because bond is a debt instrument, not an equity instrument. So when you are investing in an equity instrument, it comes under B. For the definition purpose, I am saying. They have put as A is cash, B, investment in equity instruments, C, investment in bonds or any other debt instruments or preference shares. Loan given to other companies and any receivables which is coming out of a contract. If you have a contractual right to receive cash, then it is a financial asset for you. Then they say a contractual right to exchange financial assets or financial liabilities with another entity under conditions that are potentially favorable to the entity. Okay, say for example, you are giving an asset and you are giving an asset simple A. You are getting from the other party capital A. This is in a symbolic way I have put it. You try to understand. You are giving a simple asset. A simple A means a lower value of assets and you are going to get a higher value of assets. That's why I have used simple A and capital A. Capital A is bigger than simple A. So you are giving an asset which is worth 100,000, but you are contracted to receive an asset which is worth 120,000. So you are giving 100 and getting 120. So that contract is, that exchange is potentially favorable to the company. Then it is a financial asset. It can be an exchange of liabilities also. You give a liability which is of higher value. You undertake a liability which is of a lower value. So you are on a benefiting situation. That exchange is a potentially favorable exchange. So any asset or so in an exchange of asset or liability with another entity on terms which are potentially favorable to the entity, then it can be identified as a financial asset. Then under part D, a contract that will or may be settled in the entities own equity instruments for which the entity is or may be obliged to receive variable number of the entity's own equity instruments. Now, you can underline these important words, then you can, understand it better. The contract that will be settled in the equity instrument of your company or in the entity's own equity instrument. Underline the contract that will be settled or may be settled, that part. Entity's own equity instruments, that part also you must understand. And under which entity is obliged to receive or may receive, underline the word receive, variable number of entity's own equity instruments. Okay, I have given the example there itself, but I will explain it first and then come to the example. Now, say this is coming out of a contract. This contract is going to be settled in the entity's own equity instrument. That means the contract is going to be settled by receiving shares of your own company. Say for example, JKH is providing some services to a client, and for which JKH has to get paid, no? Right? Instead of settling that transaction by cash, both parties agree, or JKH agree, to receive JKH shares to them. That is what is called settling the transaction in the equity instrument, in your own equity instrument. The contract that may be or that will be settled in the form of receiving equity instrument of your own company. Equity instrument is ordinary shares of your company. There's nothing wrong in that. So if you are to receive your own shares, there is one important thing that they are touching upon. What is it? They say you must receive variable number of shares. You must receive variable number of shares. If you receive fixed number of shares, it will become an equity transaction. But if you receive variable number of shares, it will become financial asset. Now I will put it in a very clear format, this example. Your company is providing a consultancy service for which you have agreed to receive 10 million rupees. But that 10 million rupee value is going to come in the form of your own shares. That 10 million value is going to come in the form of your own shares. Now can you tell me, to get that 10 million value, we don't know how many shares we will be receiving. It depends on the value of that share at that point in time. Say, more precisely, if I were to give you as a numerical example, see, you provide the service for a value of rupees 10 million. Rupees 10 million. But agree to receive shares. But agree to receive shares. Now, how many shares you will receive if the share price is 100 rupees? If share price rupees 100, number of shares that you will be receiving? 100,000. 100,000 shares. If the share price is 125, if the share price is 125, you will receive not 100,000. In that case, you will receive only 80,000 shares. When you multiply in both cases, you get a value of 10 million. So what it says is, you have a value to receive. But if you ask, are you going to receive fixed number of shares? Whatever happens, you are going to get 100,000 shares. If they say so, that means 100,000 shares can be valued at different prices at different times. At the time of receiving these 100,000 shares, you have to find out what the market price of those 100,000 shares. Then it's not a financial asset. Then it is an equity transaction. Then it's an equity transaction. So don't be too bothered about the double entry now. If you want, I can tell you. If it is to be treated now, say here receivables. You have a receivables here of 10 million. I'll put it in thousands. If you are treating it as an equity transaction, then you credit and debit equity. That's called equity. Equity debit. Later I will explain this to you. This can go as treasury shares. Treasury shares. I'll explain this part later. This can go as treasury shares. So which means instead of recognizing this as a receivable, if you have a contract to receive fixed number of shares against the value of goods that you have dispatched, then you are not going to make them a debtor, you are going to make it as an equity transaction. But if you had received 10 million rupee value by way of shares, which are variable number of shares, like this, depending on the price, okay, if the price is more, you get less number of shares. If the price is less, you get more number of shares. Then it is a financial asset. I'll read it once again for clarity purpose. Part D, a contract that will be settled in the entity's own equity instruments. You understand. A contract which will be settled with your own equity instruments. That means you have to receive your own equity instruments, for which the entity is or may be obliged to receive variable number of the entity's own equity instruments, the entity shares. Example, a service contract on which the entity is to receive that many of its own shares, that many. That means depending on the price, to the consideration of 10 million rupees. Let's look at some of these examples. Cash is a financial instrument, a financial asset, so it's financial instrument, cash. Investments in shares or other equity instruments, that is covered under B. Receivables covered under C, because you have contractual right to receive cash on it. Loans to other entities, the loan given by you to other entities. How about the loan given to employees? Loan given to employees, they are also, the company has contractual right to receive cash on it. If the company has contractual right to receive cash or another financial asset, then it is a financial asset. Now say for example, just to go a little further and we'll make it more comprehensive. Again, loan given to employees, but the company decides not to recover that loan in cash or in some other form of assets from employees. And the company is telling employees, hey guys, we have given now loans to you, you better work for us. You work more. Not 8-hour shift, but you work 10 hours. You work on Saturdays and Sundays also. And set off this loan by working like that for 2 years. Then if that is the contract that they have signed between the company and the employees, then the company has no contractual right to receive cash or receive another financial asset. Against that loan, how they are going to recover is by getting the labor to work. Then it's not a financial asset. This is how you have to distinguish. If you have a contractual right to receive cash, yes, it is a financial asset. But if you are, now take for example, prepayment is an asset. But if I were to ask, is it a financial asset? A prepayment, is it a financial asset? No, because next year's insurance premium we are paying this year. So we call it a prepayment. We are paid in advance, prepayment. And if you carefully read the contract, it may say, since you have paid for the next year also, we are eligible to take the insurance service for the next year. We are eligible to take the insurance service for the next year, but we are not entitled to receive any cash from the insurance company. Of course, if the insurance company is not providing the policy, then you can go and ask, hey, if you are not providing the policy, then why not you refund money? But if you look at the contractual terms contained in that, it shows very well, okay, if you are paying more than the due amount, the excess amount, we can use it for the future installments. So on which you have the right to receive the service from them, but you don't have the right to receive cash from them or any other financial asset. For that reason, prepayments are not financial assets. So look at it that way very carefully. What can go as financial assets? It has to fall within these 4 sections. Cash. Cash at bank, fixed deposits, how do you take? Fixed deposits? Just think about it. You have a contractual right to receive cash from the bank. After placing the deposit with the bank, a bank can't say that, no, we are not going to return that money. You have the right to receive that cash along with interest. Contractual right to receive cash is what financial asset means, largely. Now you place some gold with the bank on their custody. Or rather, say for example, you are investing in gold. You are investing in gold. The bank is selling, say, gold biscuits, and they invite you to invest in some gold biscuits. And you invest in the gold biscuits, and then you place those biscuits in the custody of the bank, in their safe. Is it a financial asset? Cash in hand, cash at bank, financial assets. They are cash. But gold is not cash. And gold is not giving you a contractual right to receive cash with the bank. You go to the bank and take the gold biscuits out and then go and then, give it to a jewelry shop or something, and then, get your cash there. But the bank is not promising you to give cash, or to give cash to you, rather. The bank is not promising to give cash to you. So it's not financial asset in that context. So I think you have now got it very clear what can be considered as financial assets and what are not to be considered. Right. Now come to financial liability. We can follow the same path, more or less, of financial assets to define financial liability also. Any liability that is a contractual obligation. Now this time they are talking about contractual obligation. To deliver cash or another financial asset to another entity. For example, payables. You have a contractual obligations to pay. And that will be settled in cash or by giving another financial asset. Issued bonds. Say you issue bond, your company is issuing bond. When you issue bond, people will come and give money and take the bond and go. So after having issued the bond, what is the obligation you have? You have the obligation to redeem the bond. So the bond which you have issued need to be redeemed one day. So you have the obligation to pay. There is a financial liability, contractual obligation. Or any other debt instrument for that purpose, even if you issue preference shares or bond or commercial papers or debentures, anything for that matter. The company has obligations to redeem, repay. You are taking a loan. It's a contractual obligation you have with the bank to repay or to settle in cash. And you purchase goods on credit. Then there is trade creditor, trade payable. That is a financial liability because you have a contractual obligations to pay to the creditor because you have purchased goods on credit. So don't ask or don't get confused as to find out whether there is a contract, whether we are signing any contract. It is not essentially what it means. What it says is, okay, now purchase of goods and sale of goods and all that are stemming out of contract. There's contractual term. It can be verbal contract. It can be written contract. Or you may not be getting contract for each and every transaction to sign. But there is a tacit understanding that this is stemming out of a contract. So you don't have to go and find out and investigate whether there is actually a agreement or a contract has been signed or anything. This payable is coming as part of your contractual obligation. After you sell goods to customers, you have a contractual right to receive cash. So it becomes financial liability and financial asset. Then again, what it says, exchange of financial asset or financial liability with another entity under conditions that are potentially unfavorable. Now the word unfavorable you have to cut, you have to underline. So that again, the opposite of what I discussed earlier. Now you are giving an asset and getting an asset. When you give an asset, you give a higher value. You are receiving an asset with a low value. Then the transaction is potentially unfavorable to the entity. Or if you look at the liability to liability exchange, you are giving a lower amount of liability and you are undertaking a higher amount of liability. Then that transaction is also potentially unfavorable to the company. Then part B, to define financial liability, it says the contract that will be settled in the entity's own equity instrument. Now that again, to take it like this. Now I will put it down in simple example once again. Now say you receive a service. Receive a service for which agreed to settle rupees 6 million by offering shares, your own equity instrument. Now tell me, you have to offer that many shares, that many, or what, I don't know, we don't know what number of shares. It depends on how much the share is worth. If the share is worth rupees 200, the 6 million you have divided by 200, and then you decide how many shares to be offered to it. The share is worth, okay, the share price. If the share price is 200, you give how many shares? Number of shares. 6 million you divide by 200 rupees. $30,000. If the share price is 150, then you give 40,000 shares. So whether you will have to give 30,000 shares or 40,000 shares, that depends on what? The price of the share, obviously, no? Now what I am agreeing with him is, okay, you give me a service. I get a service from somebody. And then I ask how much I have to pay. He says 6 million rupees you have to pay me for the consultancy service that he has provided. I say, okay, I can settle, but not in cash. I don't have cash. Can I give my shares to you? Can I give my ordinary shares of my company? Are you interested? They say, they may say, yes, okay, then you give me. Then he is asking how many shares? Because now this is a future transaction, mind you. The settlement is going to take place in another 3 months' time. So how can I or he agree for any number of shares for a value of 6 million if we don't know how much the share is going to be worth in 3 months' time? So that is why this variable number of shares are getting involved. Now I agree to offer variable number of shares. So I have not fixed the number of shares. We have fixed the value. But the settlement is going to take place by offering shares, and the number of shares that will be offered is all depending on the price of the share at the time of settlement. Therefore, it can be 30,000 shares, 40,000 shares, 50,000 shares. It depends on the price. So therefore, I can say that we contracted to offer variable number of shares towards the settlement of this 6 million value. In that case, the double entry should go as how? For this, the double entry is consultancy service, debit, that's expense, debit, and credit, payable. This is financial liability, 6 million. But at the time the shares are offered, what happened then? Then you debit payable, say equity, and credit equity. Because you are offering shares now, it has to go to the stated capital. At the time of offering shares. But until you offer the shares for 3 months' time, as I said in the earlier example, until you offer the shares, they should be reflected as financial liability. But the financial liability goes off and equity will replace the financial liability along with the issue of shares. Now, if I were to agree for fixed number of shares, say, instead of saying to settle for offering shares, not for a value, but offering 50,000 shares. See the subtle difference, how it may change the whole double entry, accounting, presentation, and balance sheet structure, all that have a big change here. Now, if I were to say, I receive a service from a consulting company for which I agree to settle, or for which I agree to offer 50,000 shares. That's all. So if that transaction happens today, I must account it based on the today's share price. Say, for example, today's share price is 18 rupees. Sorry, 180 rupees. If the today's share price is 180 rupees, then you put it like this. 180 into 180 rupees into you have agreed 50,000 shares to be offered. This is fixed. Then I debit consultancy service. That is an expense. 9 million. 180 into 50,000. 9 million. Now guess where do you credit? Equity. Equity. 9 million. Say change. But time to time now, you don't have to exactly find out the price of the share at the time of issue. And you don't have to adjust it upward and downward. That's not required. At the time the transaction was carried out, find out how much the share is worth, and that is the value that you have agreed. Just that the settlement is taking place on another day, after 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 months. But equity value should not change, need not to get changed. Now, one thing that I want to discuss with you now this, when I say equity, later in a while also I will come to this point again. But when I say equity now, you may have the confusion, what is that account name is? This is again something that I discussed, if you remember, in the class. I said that on the same note that name is not material. The substance is what you have to look at and what it really is and means. Say, if you are very keen to know what that equity is, equity means what is it? You can ask, do you mean stated capital? Yes, well, at this point, can I now say this is a legal thing? Huh? When the shares are issued, you can put it to the stated capital. And people say that when the shares are issued even at a premium, don't put the premium into share premium account. That is an old conventional accounting. Now the latest accounting is put all issued value to the stated capital. There's nothing called share premium. Who says this? This is all came from Companies Act. Strictly speaking, we are not bound to do everything by the Act. That is why the very reason it says the economic substance of a transaction is what is to be considered more than the legal format of it. So in that context, it's very clear But anyway, we don't want to violate the laws, Companies Act. We don't want to. So if the Companies Act says nothing called share premium, nothing called, so your issue price is what matters and all that. So then on that note, we as accountants have discovered a word called stated capital along with the legal people. And we have put it to the stated capital account. Now one can say that you can't put it to the stated capital account without issuing shares. Now look at that transaction. I said, we receive consulting services today, but I agree with the firm to offer shares in 3 months' time. But I need to record the transaction today. So I have received the consultant service, I have consumed the service, so expenditure is there. But I have to now find a account for a credit entry. Now you know where it will end up. It is purely an equity transaction. I have agreed to give them 50,000 shares. So now what I can say for the time is, I will put it to equity, but you find a name. Maybe somebody can say, shares pending allotments. These are special names. But shares pending allotments is, I have to ask this question in black and white. Is it an equity or is it a liability? That is what matters to me. Not about what you call it and what it is. That very example that I took, by the name of a person. You can't say it's a man, a boy or a girl. If you say Kanti, is Kanti, so if I ask who is Kanti? A man or a woman? You may say Kanti is woman. No, it need not be the case. There can be men in the names of Kanti. If there are people of such, then what to do? So that's why don't go by the name. Go by your real substance. So likewise, shares pending allotments, I would rather say it is an equity item. So that's why I say give credit to equity. But examiner is not so bothered to find out what name you are going to assign on something. But whatever the name you are assigning, it has to be meaningful. But along with that, what is important is identifying the category correctly. Earlier also now I said debit equity. So you may be wondering debit equity. What is this debit equity? I will come to that. Treasury shares later. We have to discuss about it separately. So these are financial liabilities. Now once again, if you agree to settle the transaction by offering variable number of ordinary shares, it will be treated as a financial liability. But if you agree to settle the transaction by offering fixed number of ordinary shares, fixed number of own equity instrument, that will tantamount to an equity transaction. Examples in page number 4, you can quickly go through. Payables, loan from other entities, issued bonds, and derivative I will discuss with you later, derivative financial assets and financial liabilities. Obligations to deliver own shares worth a fixed amount of cash. That is fixed amount of cash, not fixed amount of shares. So don't get confused. Agree to deliver your shares for a fixed amount of cash. That means value is 10 million, but you will give number of shares to the value of 10 million. So that number of shares may vary depending on the share price. Then come to the third item of financial instrument, which is equity instrument. Equity instrument is a contract that provides a residual interest in the assets of an entity after deducting all the liabilities. So that is what equity is. Assets minus liabilities. No? Assets minus liabilities is equity. Assets minus liability. We take liability to the other side. It's assets minus liabilities is equity. So equity is always provide not the prior interest but the residual interest. Prior interest means on the top of everybody. No, equity won't come on the top of everybody. Equity man will claim only the residue. And that's why we call them residual claimers. So equity provides residual interest in assets after deducting all liabilities. Examples of equity instruments include ordinary shares. See what I have written within the brackets. That cannot be put back to the issuer by the holder. Preference shares also can be an equity that cannot be redeemed by the holder or provide for non-discretionary dividends. Non-discretionary means there's no discretion on the part of the company to decide. That means the company has to pay. The company has no freedom to say, no, we have decided not to pay. That means non-discretionary. Discretionary dividend means for ordinary shares, what is there is discretionary dividend. The company decides whether to pay or not, and even to pay how much and all that. It's all up to the company to decide. Then there's no obligation on the part of the company. It is entirely on their wish. They can pay. But non-discretionary is where you don't have discretion or your wish. You are compelled to pay. So when there's no non-discretionary dividend, then it can be an ordinary shares, or rather it can be an equity instrument. Then written call options I'll come to it in a while. Along with that example I have given in page number 5, I will discuss that about written call options. Contracts that will be settled in the entity's own equity instruments are classified as equity instruments of the entity if they have to provide fixed number of ordinary shares. No? Contract that will be settled by issuance of a fixed number of ordinary shares. That's already underlined, fixed number of ordinary shares. And there again, now second thing is the example for written call options. I can touch that on now. If they are derivative contracts, and will be settled by the exchange of a fixed number of entities' own equity instruments and a fixed amount of cash. I think we can't hide from derivatives anymore. Let me quickly give you, I think at this level, at strategic level, I don't think that you will find it difficult to understand what derivatives are, because you have a separate lesson to be learned about derivatives for your corporate finance and risk management. Yet for all, I'll give you a quick brief on what a derivative is with one example or couple of examples. Now, take an option. And give more specific example with a call option. A call option will give you the right to buy something. Say right to buy. Right to buy. With a more specific example, there's a call option under which you can buy shares of a company A shares, or say, or even you can take a company specifically, say commercial bank shares. At rupees 130 on or before 1st January 2021. And this call option, this is for 1 million shares. 1 million shares you can buy at the price of 130 on or before 1st of January 2021. So there's a call option like this. Somebody writes it and somebody buys it. So it can be a company which can issue, or even when it can happen between two individuals. So options can be written by anyone. You will learn about it all in CFRM, Corporate Finance and Risk Management. I'm just trying to explain what a derivative is. Now, if the share price becomes 125, what is the value that option has? Value of the option. Because you have the right to buy the shares at 130, but the share is currently trading in the market at 125. So when you can buy the share from the market at 125, you have no reasons to go and exercise the option and buy it at 130 from the man who sold the option to you. So option has no value at all, zero. If it goes to 135, then the option has a value. Because a share which is trading at 135 can be bought at 130. Can be bought at 130. This is the exercise price. So that you have a benefit of 5 rupees for each share. So the option price is 5 rupees. If this goes at 152 rupees, just take an odd figure. The difference between 152 and 130, you have a gain of 22 rupees because of the option. So that can be the value of the option in a simple way. Mind you, options are valued in different methods by using different techniques. There's a thing called Black-Scholes model and all that. Some complicated models are there. But I'm trying to, explain this concept to you in a very simple way. If I can buy the share at, if the market price is 152 and if I can buy it at 130, obviously I have a gain of 22. That is all because of the option that I am carrying. Therefore, it has a value of 22 rupees. So if it comes to 160, needless to say, my option is 30. Now tell me, options. Option value is always fluctuating, going up and down based on the share price. So this is called, share is called underlying. Underlying is the share. This is the underlying. We call it underlying. Underlying instrument is share. The price of the option is always depending on the price of the underlying, which is the share. When it comes to 135, it has a value of 5. When it comes to 160, it has value 30. So what we can say is, the value of the option is derived. The value of the option is derived from the value of the share. So since the value of the option is derived from the value of the underlying, which is the share, we call this option, we name this option as a derivative. Because the value of the option is being derived from the value of the underlying, which is the share. So if value of something is going to be derived from value of something else, right, then it's a derivative. So it's not the right example that I am saying, giving. Say the water and the water bottle. The value of the water bottle is, say, depending on the value of water. If there's no water, if there's no need for a water, then there's no need for a bottle. So then I can say the bottle is a derivative and water is underlying. May not be the perfect example, but I'm just trying to, relate this to in a common world examples. So anything, if value of something were to be derived from value of another instrument or asset or whatever. Now there, for example, there are weather derivatives. On a climatic condition, you have a derivative. You can get an agricultural crop against the climatic condition. So the agriculture crop, its value is derived from the weather. There are so many different derivatives are there. Commodity derivatives are there. Derivatives are very popular as it comes to any instruments. Now, for example, shares. The share is a major instrument, underlying. And you are actually producing another minor instrument, another smaller fellow from the shares. Now one can say, okay, hey, don't buy the shares, buy the derivative, buy the option. Now say, for example, when the share price goes up from 125 to 160, when this goes up from 125 to 160, you are gaining 35 rupees against 125 rupees investment. Say, assume that you have bought it at 125. When it goes to 160, you are making, what is the return? Little over 25%. %28. Now assume that you bought these options at 5 rupees a share. Option price, assume, option price 5 rupees, because nobody is going to give an option to you without charging a price. So option is 5 rupees. You bought the option for 5 rupees when the share price was 125. The share price climbed up to 160. Then the option price went up to 30. So the 5 rupee option has now gone to the value of 30. So 5 rupee option has gone to 30. That means how much you are making? 25 rupees you are making again against an investment of 5 rupees. That means your return is 500%, 5 times. So on the same share price movement, if you have taken position in the option, you are making a 500% return. And if you are taking a position in the underlying on the share, you are making only 28%. Then one can say, hey, why you are wasting too much of money, spending a lot of money, but still you are making a smaller gain by taking positions in the share. But instead, if you take the position in the derivative, its value also is going to be derived from the price movement of the underlying, then you are better off. one can say that, which is not incorrect, but at the same time, as you trade on the options, option is a leveraged instrument. This is what is called leverage, because from the small price movement you get big increase in the percentage return. Similarly, if the price drops, the percentage decline also can be huge. So derivative is a risky instrument compared to the underlying instrument. So you will learn all these things in your financial management module. But here I just wanted you to understand what the derivative is. Option is one good example for a derivative. And likewise, there are so many other derivatives, forward contracts we can think about. You enter into a contract to buy dollars at a given price. So that forward contract has a value depending on where the dollar is now and then. Say for example, you agreed to buy dollars at 200 rupees in 6 months' time. Now the dollar has gone up to 210. So when the dollar is at 210, even at this moment, getting an opportunity to buy dollars at 200 rupees in 6 months down the line is a great opportunity. Based on that, this kind of a forward contract can place very high value in the market. So then again, we are going back to the same concept, a derivative. Now just to relate to our subject matter at this moment, it says a derivative contract that will be settled by the exchange of a fixed number of ordinary shares and fixed amount of cash. Having read that, I would like to go to you to go to example number 3, which we skipped here, same page. Third one says written call options. Now written call option means the company is writing. The company writes means after having written it, they have to sell. Needless to say, they will sell. Written call option. They are writing a call option and then selling. So as they sell call option, what will be the transaction there? Those who buy call option from the company will pay. That's why I am selling call options. I get some money, like this 5 rupees per share or whatever. For an option, 5 rupees, like that. So for 1 million, I make 5 million rupees. I give this option of buying 1 million shares at 130 at a price of 5 rupees. So I sell these options and earn 5 million rupees. 1 million into 5 rupees. Now how do I put this double entry? Debit cash. No doubt about it. We receive cash. Where do you credit? Is it a revenue? Look at what is going to happen with this call option. What is going to happen with this call option? The man who bought this call option has what? He has the right to buy shares from me. He has the right to buy shares from the company. What many shares? If you link to this example, he has right to buy 1 million shares from the company at the price of 130. Then we are talking about variable number of shares or fixed number of shares that he can buy. He can buy fixed number of shares, 1 million shares at 130. So if he were to bring 130 million rupees and then if the company were to issue 1 million shares, it's a pure share issue transaction. It's an equity transaction. So this call option, what you are giving, is going to finally end up with an equity transaction in the company. In that case, the proceeds that you collected from the sale of call options, which is that 5 million rupees I mentioned, should also be treated as part of equity transaction without taking them as a revenue into the P&L. Because it is for the issue of shares you got that additional proceeds, and which is a derivative. So a derivative contract that will be settled in offering fixed number of shares for a fixed cash. In that case, the money collected on the sale of the derivative also to be treated as equity transaction. So that is what clearly mentioned there. Now, having said that, now look at this example at the top of page number 5. Examples of instruments that will or may be settled in own equity and are classified as equity instruments of the entity are an issued call option. That means they are issuing, more precisely they say, this will enable the buyer of the call option to buy 1,000 shares at 100 rupees. But they made 9,000 rupees on the sale of the call option. So debit cash 9,000, credit equity 9,000. Now once again, equity means it's not the share capital, but you can call it, you can put it as call option. But later you can transfer it to a stated capital if you want to, on the issue of shares. A purchase call option that gives the entity the right to repurchase a fixed number of its own equity shares. A purchase call option. Here, the company is purchasing call option to buy their own equity shares. Something similar to the example that we discussed earlier. Now you are paying for the call option. Cash credit and debit equity. That's how it goes. Then more importantly, the paragraph that follows the two examples, if you read it. If a financial instrument requires the issuer to repurchase its own issued shares, own issued equity instrument for cash, there is a financial liability. This is what I told you. Company issues shares with the obligations to buy it, repurchase it. Then the repurchasing can happen in, say, 3 years' time for a value. So you take the present value of that repurchasing value and show it as a liability now. So you receive cash today. More precisely, the example is you receive cash today, you issue shares. But don't put the shares that you issue into the share capital or stated capital. Now see how beautiful this is. And how well they have thought about it. And how fair the accounting treatment is. They have gone by the substance, once again not by legal format. These are very, very good examples that we can bring out to distinguish why economic substance is much, much more important than the mere legal format of it. Now, all of you know that when you issue ordinary shares, debit cash, credit stated capital, nothing else. You issue share certificates. You pass resolutions. You issue shares. And you go and register it with the company registrar and all that. These are all legal formats. And accountant might wonder, right, okay, what is the double entry of it? Debit cash, credit stated capital. Very true. Fine. But these shares, when we issue, you have a condition attached. What is this condition? The company, issuing company, has to buy these shares back in 3 years' time. Then, when the shares are issued, company has got an obligation to buy it back. Then it can never be an equity instrument. Then the ordinary shares you have issued should be shown as a liability. As a liability. Then what is the value that you are going to put there? Is now say this liability is going to crystallize, or rather this liability is going to be settled in 3 years' time. Now you say you issue 1 million shares at 20 rupees. And then you say that in 3 years' time I will buy it at 30 rupees. So the 30 rupees, so today you are collecting 20 rupees a share. But what is your real liability is 30 million to be paid in 3 years' time. So that 30 million in 3 years' time value has to be, ascertained based on the present value technique. Take the present value of 30 million, which is going to happen in 3 years' time. And that is what is to be shown as a liability. So that is why the standard has now gone a long way and long way away from the conventional thinking. Now come to this part. In page number 5 at the bottom, the following assets and liabilities are not treated as financial instruments. That means they are not financial assets or financial liabilities. Physical assets, land, building, machinery, can never be a financial asset because it has no contractual right to receive cash. You will receive cash on the deployment of the asset, but you don't have a contractual right to receive cash. Just because you have a machinery, you are not signing contract with anybody to receive money straight away from the machinery. You have to produce something, you have to sell it, and then it is getting used in the business activities. And as a result of only you will earn money, but this is not something coming out of any contractual rights. Now, if you lease out a machinery, lease receivable is a contractual asset, financial asset. But they are treated under separate standards. SLFRS 16 is very much there to take care of it. Likewise, receivables, you will understand, debtors or receivables are well covered under SLFRS 15, even though it's a financial asset. Investment in associates are covered under LKS number 28, but they are for all investments in shares, which is a financial asset. Investment in subsidiaries are covered under SLFRS 10, but even though it is a financial asset. I can give many examples like that. Even though they are treated as financial assets, even though they are financial assets, but treated under different accounting standards. Intangible assets, it's not a financial asset. It's not for the same reason that I mentioned for physical assets. Prepaid expenses I discussed with you. Deferred revenue. Now deferred revenue, the revenue that you have collected in advance, it's not a financial liability for you because you have no contractual obligations to pay. You have an obligation to serve, provide goods, provide the service. That is what your obligation is. Not to give money, not to give cash, not to give any financial asset. Therefore, deferred revenue is the revenue that you have collected in advance so that you have a promise that you will fulfill the obligation of supplying goods or service. Then you have no obligations to pay in cash. Income tax liabilities are not arising out of contractual terms. Income tax liability is coming out of a statutory provision. So, they are not treated as financial liabilities. That's first part of LKS number 32 we have looked at. As we return, we will look at the remaining parts of LKS 32.